Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the next part of the MTG Arena set review for War of the Spark. Time to talk about the second half of the green cards, but before we do so, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content, and please consider whitelisting YouTube on your ad block to help support us content creators. And now on to the cards. Alright, first we have MoVu Loyal Companion, a limited only card. But in limited, this is pretty strong actually. 4 mana, 3/3 Trample Vigilance is a bit underpowered, but once you get the first counter on this, MoVu becomes really powerful. Great at playing offense and defense, which is both good for protecting your own planeswalkers as well as threatening opposing ones, thanks to Trample, making it really hard to even jump block them to protect the planeswalker. And it has really great synergy with all the counter placing and proliferate stuff, since even proliferate adds 2 counters. So yeah, once this gets to 7/7, it's really hard to deal with in combat, and also not a whole lot of removal that actually kills it anymore. So pretty strong uncommon, I would say. In the right deck anyway. Next we have New Horizons, one of the nice cards to pair with MoVu. It lets you put MoVu to 5/5 and get a proliferate starting. It also helps with color fixing, ramp you. This card is a lot better than I thought and than it looks in the proliferate archetype. I had 2 proliferate heavy decks so far in the format, and both of them had 3 New Horizons, and I was quite happy with that for various reasons. The ramp is quite nice, letting you catch up on doing enough things. This triggers the Flux Channeler and so on and so forth, and you need to get that first counter on something to get enough value out of proliferate, and New Horizons does that decently. Also, it's great at enabling a lot of splashes, even double splashes. My current draft deck, for example, is a green-white deck with a bit of blue and splashing a Sarkhan, because I have 3 New Horizons and a single New Horizons cast Sarkhan, so I have 3 sources for 1 Sarkhan, and that's the kind of stuff that New Horizons enabled, so keep that in mind. Next we have Nissa, who shakes the world. This is kind of an interesting planeswalker. It's a 5 mana, 5 loyalty planeswalker. Whenever you tap a forest for mana, add an additional green mana. For +1, you put 3 counters on up to 1 target non-creature land you control, untap it, and it becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with vigilance and haste. That's still a land. So you cannot make lands bigger than 3/3 with this, which is important. You can plus it without animating a land, which is also important. But it also lets you sort of get 2 mana back. So basically, if you play her on 5, she virtually costs 3. You can play a 2 costing in addition, or just have the land protect her, so she protects herself pretty well. And yeah, the lands also have vigilance, so you can usually play her, attack with the land if the opponent doesn't have a good blocker, and then play something else, for example, giving you quite a nice momentum swing, and the next turn you can go really big. This is one of the more likely ways to play finales for X10 or more in constructed, or even in limited, I would say. And yeah, her -8 ability is also quite nice. She lets you thin all the forests out of your deck, generate a whole lot of mana, and also makes your lands indestructible. So the ones you already turned into creatures now are unkillable, and you can animate all the other ones in the consecutive turns. So she's a pretty good 1 card win condition in that regard. That also has some card advantage potential and stuff. So the card definitely has constructed potential. Not sure if and where she's gonna show up, but it's definitely a card that is worth thinking about and messing around in constructed. And in limited, she's obviously a powerhouse. Next we have her namesake card, Nissa's Triumph. Pretty decent. For 2 mana you get to draw 2 cards, even though it's only 2 basic forests. But if you control a Nissa, you get to draw 3 forests instead. And yeah, nothing too special, but if you're just looking for a bit of card advantage and your deck is fairly mana hungry, in limited or constructed, this seems like a solid option. If in most scenarios, drawing 2 lands is worth 2 cards. Next we have Paradise Druid. I think at least for now the card is heavily held back in Constructed by the existence of Chain Whirler, which is why Incubation Druid is strictly better. Once Chain Whirler leaves the format, I think all in all this is going to be better than Incubation Druid. It's better at fixing colors, it has attack, and it has hexproof, so you can play it on 2 and guaranteed ramp into 4, for example. But yeah, the existence of Chain Whirler I think makes the card unplayable for now. Land of Elf is just barely playable because it costs 1 and lets you ramp from like 1 to 2 and often gives you the chance to get like 2 ramps out of it before it dies to Chain Whirler. Paradise Druid just doesn't do that, so the card is not playable for now. But I think long term the card's actually pretty good and Constructed if Chain Whirler wouldn't exist. And in Limited, it's pretty great, I think. 2 mana, 2/1 is fine for a 2-drop, but if it's an accelerant that also happens to be an okay 2-drop stat-wise, especially once she doesn't need to ramp anymore, is quite a good deal. So about as good as something like Druid of the Cowl would be in Limited. Druid has the better stats, but this one has hexproof and enabled splashes, so probably even a bit better than Druid of the Cowl, if you think about it. Next we have Plain White Celebration, the 7 mana sorcery. You choose 4 modes. You can choose 1 mode more than once. Make a 2/2 creature token that's all colors. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, proliferate, or gain 4 life. So yeah, this is gonna do a lot of things, and it can make like 4 2/2s or all these other things. It's a pretty flexible, fairly powerful card. It's a bit expensive. It's not gonna be Constructed relevant, I think, but it seems like in Limited this is quite a powerful like game-turning card that you just kind of play, and after that you should be in a very winning position. So yeah, not sure if it's quite bomb level in Limited because it's a bit situational, and if you just make like 4 2/2s for example, or like 3 2/2s and get back something from the graveyard, it's not that powerful, but it seems like a pretty strong rare regardless. Next we have Poland Bright Druid. Pretty amazing 2-drop I think. Basically a 2 mana 2/2 at worst, or just like a 2 mana 1/1 that lets you put a critical counter on something bigger, especially to start proliferating, but it also proliferates if you already have something worth proliferating. So it's a very critical like puzzle piece for the proliferate archetypes to serve as an enabler for both parts, which is pretty great. So I'm happy to pick these up plentiful in these archetypes. Next we have Primordial Worm, kind of an old school card coming back. Yeah, 6 mana, 7/6. Nothing too splashy here, but pretty good stats for the cost. So if you just need like some finisher, some top end threat, and are lacking, this seems fine, especially with like the ramp from New Horizons and stuff. Just a decent role player, I would say. Next we have Return to Nature, mostly a great sideboard card in Limited, but also in Constructed. It's basically a better Naturalize. It's Naturalize that also gives you the option to exile target card from a graveyard. That's basically it. So yeah, Power Creep has arrived and has reached Naturalize. Now Naturalize can also exile cards. This makes for a pretty decent sideboard card in Modern potentially, giving you a lot of flexibility there, so that's nice. Then we have Snare Spinner, a pretty solid spider. It's a 2 mana 1/3 reach, so it blocks fairly well in general in the early game, but in terms of flyers it blocks as a 3/3, and there's a couple of like 2/2 or 2/3 flyers in the game, like the Artifact Flyer, the 4-drop Drake without a counter on it, the 3-drop Aven, Shriek Diver, and so on. So this does a pretty good job at defending against a lot of the common flyers in the format, and that's kind of what green wants really. Also it's a 2-drop, which is important because you want 2-drops a lot in your like green decks, so you can turn 3 New Horizon to put a counter on something, making this a 4/4 against flyers and a 2/4 in general, and therefore doing a pretty good job at locking the opponent out of combat for a while. And then we have Steady Aim, an okay but not super impressive trick, but it gets better as a sideboard card against flyer heavy decks. 2 mana, untap target creature, +1/+4, and it gains reach. Older versions of this were usually like 2 mana, untap target creature, and it gains +2/+2, no reach, and sometimes a marginal additional option like an expensive kicker or something. So yeah, this is a more defensive trick, both because of the reach and because of the stats, but it still does the job. It's like a fine trick. Not sure how likely I am to end up with this main deck though, in most decks. Next we have Storm the Citadel, kind of like a weak overrun, but it is splashable, so that's nice. For 5 mana, until end of turn, creatures you control get +2/+2, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, destroy a target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. That's a weird mode to add here, since it's pretty conditional and usually not gonna do a whole lot. So it's mostly just like 4 mana +2/+2, which is a pretty bad overrun. Losing 1 stat point, and especially the like trample, is kind of a big deal. So it's much worse than overrun, to a point where I'm not even sure how playable it is gonna be in most scenarios, honestly. Next we have Sundering Cheratok. It's a 5 mana 4/5 trample. That's not that big for a 5 drop. When it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control gain trample until end of turn, which is also not that valuable. So yeah, it seems okay, like it's not terrible. I mean, Dowser of Light in Guild of Ravnica, for example, was a pretty decent 5 drop, but that was more because it was black and because of how the decks played out. Your green decks will probably care a bit more about like proactive stats and bigger stats, and this is just a bit underpowered for 5, but I guess if you need like a decent beefier creature, especially one that can hold the ground, Thundering Cheratok seems like an okay filler, I guess. Next we have Vivian, Champion of the Wild. Pretty cheap rare planeswalker, 3 mana, fairly high loyalty, 4, and with +1 she basically comes down as 5. You may cast creature spells as though they had flash, which is actually a pretty nice ability, especially in limited, to surprise ambush the opponent all the time. It's going to be really hard for them to plan attacks with this out. But even in constructed, this seems like an interesting ability. Like imagine everything having flash against control, for example, playing this on turn 2 or turn 3 with Land of Elves out against, say, Esper control. Seems pretty obnoxious. And yeah, with the +1 until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gains vigilance and reach. That's pretty underwhelming, so like the +1 is super marginal, but it's a 3-cost planeswalker with a solid static ability, so that seems fine. Also the vigilance and the reach both help a bit, making it easier to protect Vivian, which is nice. And the -2 lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile 1 face down and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order, and for as long as it remains exiled you may look at that card and you may cast it if it's a creature card. So basically I don't know why it like exiles this instead of putting it into your hand. Like, what? I can't really think of this making a difference. I guess the difference is that you don't have to reveal it, so the opponent doesn't know what you get, and they don't know if you got something at all, especially with her flash. So I guess it makes it's worded that way to obscure the information whether or not you found something playable, and making it so the opponent has to take a risk to attack Vivian because they don't know if you have a creature and what creature it is that you could flash in. So I guess it kind of virtually protects Vivian a bit more because the opponent might not attack Vivian because it is too risky. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting wording there, I guess, obscuring the fact whether or not you hit. But yeah, all in all, fairly solid planeswalker. We'll probably see this in constructed somewhere in the long run. Not sure if how well that fits into standard right now, but I think yeah, long term this is a constructed card, and in limited it's also a pretty good planeswalker for sure. So if you open this, you're usually gonna pick it. Then we have Vivian's Arkbow, another pretty good rare. For X and tap, you discard a card, and look at the top X cards of your library. You may put a creature card with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So this card's pretty interesting. First of all, it lets you turn any card into potential creatures. Second of all, it makes them instant speed. And third of all, it's an artifact and it's cheap, so it's kind of hard to kill. And it also lets you kind of dig for creatures because it lets you see fairly deep. Like for example, on turn 3 you can already see 3 cards deep. But your deck needs to have enough creatures with low enough casting cost to make this reliable, because spending a whole turn's mana and a card on activating this and then whiffing is pretty devastating. Also, you have to spend 2 mana on playing this without having any impact, but that's fine. You can often do that like on turn 2 where there's not a whole lot going on. So yeah, all in all, pretty powerful if your deck is built accordingly, and this seems like a pretty interesting card for constructed. Also, especially as a sideboard card in grindier matchups or against control. Like Esper Control looks like it's really not gonna like it. It doesn't have any main deck answers for this. The sideboard answers are very limited. It's usually like a couple of hostage takers, and that's it. And then this is just like gonna churn out creatures and also lets you turn situational cards or access lands into threats. So this seems like a really nice role player in constructed for these things, and maybe even like a main deck card in certain things to just kind of have utility and flexibility. Definitely an interesting and strong card. Then we have Vivian's Grizzly. It's a 3 mana 2/3, and for 4 you can look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Otherwise you put it on the bottom of your library. Nothing special. 3 mana 2/3s are kind of underwhelming, but okay if you just need something for your curve. And the ability is decent-ish. In a really long game, this can draw you a card here and there, which can make a difference. So it's not as bad as it could be for like a 3 mana 2/3. So basically like an okay filler, not something that I want to have in my deck usually. And last but not least, or kinda least because it's not very good, we have Wardscale Crocodile. This time our Croc has hexproof. It's a 5 mana 5/3. Not that great, but probably a bit better here than it would normally be, because for example in the Proliferate deck against removal heavier decks, even if you don't want to run this main deck, you can board this in, put a counter on it and start proliferating on it, and then suddenly you have a pretty big hexproof threat that the opponent is going to have a hard time handling and beating, but that's about it. So it's a bad filler / sideboard card, I would say. Alright, that concludes the second half of the green cards, and next time we're going to start on the multicolor cards where most of the like constructed sauce is at. So that's the most exciting part, I would say, in terms of constructed. Alright, hope you guys are still enjoying the series. Let me know in the comments what you think of the series and the cards. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, share it on the internet, and subscribe to the channel, of course, if you haven't yet. Turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future MTG and other content. And please, once again, I want to urge you to consider whitelisting YouTube on your ad block. This would really help us content creators a lot. It's a great way to support us for free and yeah, help us keep making content for you guys. That's it again for this time. I'll see you in the next video. I'm your host ManuS. Thank you for watching. Bye.